one you've heard from, both of Iranian origin, who fled the Islamic Revolution, both fighting for human rights in their native country, one Jew, one Muslim. Ellie Cohanim is back with us for a special conversation with her friend and colleague, Iranian journalist Nazenin Ansari, another Mukhayriq Initiative board member and the managing editor of Kayhan London and Kayhan Life publications. And Ellie, I'll turn it over to you both.
Thanks so much. As a daughter of Iran, it's a special privilege for me to introduce my friend and fellow Persian, Nazenin Ansari, a trustee of the Foreign Press Association in London and the Persia Educational Foundation. Nazenin Ansari has spearheaded groundbreaking efforts, including the first ever Iranian Women's Leadership Conference in London and the first ever Dialogues of Culture Award. She has worked with many educational foundations, including the Encyclopedia Iranica Foundation and the Friends of Persian-language Society at Cambridge University. Nazenin, I want to speak with you both as a Persian sister and as a Jew speaking to a Muslim friend. We both know that media headlines might make it seem as if Iran is at the heart of a deadly clash between Muslims and Jews. But we both know that there is a deep shared culture beyond the Iranian regime's angry chants of death to Israel. What are some inspiring moments of Muslim-Jewish connection in Iranian history? I've heard you in the past mention an event 100 years ago when the Shah of Iran prayed at a synagogue in the city of Esfahan. Was this a pivotal moment?
Well, thank you so very much, Ellie John, for having me here. And I want to wish you and all the other guests and the viewers a very happy Nowruz. Persians all over the world celebrated Nowruz, the coming of spring, only an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. And I hope that this spring will herald a year relished with good health, love, peace, and friendship amongst us all. You talked about Reza Shah and the status of our Jewish community in Iran. I should just, before talking about what Reza Shah did, just spend a couple of minutes telling you what it was before Reza Shah came. And certainly the socio-legal economic status of the Jews of Iran goes back to the Safavids. During the Safavids, that was the first Persian dynasty after the Arab invasion of Iran. And because the Safavids adopted Shia Islam as the state religion beginning in the 17th century, there was a lot of a decree of forced conversions. But more importantly, I think their status, the economic and socioeconomic status of the Jews and their legal status was very much part of the Islamic attitude, not only towards people of other religions, but also towards women. But specifically, as the Jewish community was concerned, they had to pay an annual tax that was basically because of their religion. They could not contradict certain articles of the Constitution and of the law. They couldn't, they weren't allowed to build houses of worship. They weren't allowed to play bells or establish tall buildings or buildings taller than other Muslims. And they had to accept all the regulations imposed upon them. As far as marriage was concerned, Shiite men could marry women from the people of the book, including Jews, through a temporary marriage system. But it was not a traditional marriage system that was allowed between any man and woman of the Muslim faith. Also, as far as inheritance is concerned, the Jews could not inherit, for example, from a Muslim, whereas Muslims could inherit from everybody. And when it came to punishment, it was also, there was a discrimination as far as that was concerned. But let's go back to, now let's come to Reza Shah. When Reza Shah came to power, knowing all the weaknesses that the Iranian state during the Qajar period had experienced. During the Qajar period, Iran was very weak. It was a country divided between the British in the south and the Russians in the north, and there hadn't been much development as far as industrially or militarily. So, and as Reza Shah was part of the new, most modern military army at that time in Iran, which was set up by the Russians, he had really experienced close hand, and he had witnessed what this backwardness meant for Iran. So when he came to power, he brought in with him all the beliefs and the aspirations of the constitutional movement in Iran, a movement that was based on enlightenment, the story of enlightenment in Europe. It was a story of the age of reason. And so certainly he followed also what Kemal Ataturk was doing in Turkey. And as far as he was concerned, it was through a secular state that Iran could modernize. It was only through citizenship and citizenry and active participation of all Iranian citizens that Iran could develop. And this is what he carried. And certainly when he came, he was in power. Not only was he a good friend of the women, but also the Jewish community under Reza Shah prospered. Specifically, for example, they could take on various any kind of profession that they wanted. Before, they couldn't. They could live anywhere they wanted, whereas before they could only live in the areas designated for them. They could, for example, take secured leave from the military during holidays, during Jewish holidays, whereas before they couldn't. And they could also now emigrate, whereas before it was unlawful. So with Reza Shah came a modern Iran. With Reza Shah came a participatory citizenry. And the Jews and our Jewish brothers and sisters were part of this modernization process of Iran. And by 1979, Iran's rate of growth and development was on par not only with Japan and even further, even it was on par with many of the countries in Europe. And that's because every single Iranian citizen felt as a shareholder in the future of that country. And this was the story that was not only about the Jews in Iran, but it was also a story about the women of Iran.
Absolutely, Nazenin. And that, what you're describing is the experience that my Jewish family had during the Shah's reign. I would love for our audience to, and the people joining us today, to learn a little bit about your personal experience. You've talked a bit about growing up in Iran and your educational experience. Could you tell people what that was like?
Well, yes. As I've told you before, John, it was only after the revolution that I realized that I was basically going to a school, elementary school, that was set up by a lovely Jewish woman who was very active. She was an activist and she was one of the leaders of the women's movement in Iran. She had set up a school, elementary school, that, no matter, I was Muslim, but we never, we came from a secular state, from a secular family personally. And my classmates and friends were either Christian, Armenian, Baha'i, or Jewish. We were taught by Jewish teachers, by English teachers, and by Muslim teachers. And it was only after the revolution that we realized that we had never talked. We had only seen and experienced one another as individuals and as friends. And certainly the Iran that I grew up in, even when I look back, I see many of the aspirations, for example, of the Iranian women's movement or of the human rights movement in general, is what we had before. And it's like going back to the future. So in a way, I am blessed to have been born before the revolution. I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to study and work and be with my fellow citizens and my fellow countrymen and women, whether in Iran or outside of Iran, now in the UK, regardless of what religion we have. Because at the end of the day, we are all human and all our bloods are red. So I hope the future will bring us closer together and let us realize that we connect as humans first and foremost.
Indeed, Nazanin, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that for many of us who are from the Middle East, North Africa, but exiled in the West, and we're fortunate to be in the West, but still we miss our homes. And many of us had that good fortune of living in times where there was coexistence between the different religions and the different ethnic groups. So thanks, my personal thanks to you for sharing your experience with everyone.
Yes, thanks so much, Nazenin Ansari. It's so great to hear, that story, and especially your childhood, how you grew up, the importance of that early education, of just